many respects, Sibelius' Fifth Symphony symbolizes the dichotomous status of the composer's music. By the time this work was commissioned by the Finnish government to provide a capstone for the national celebration of Sibelius' 50th birthday in December of 1915, he was already a revered figure in his homeland. During an era when Finland was seeking to free itself from Russian domination, the indigenous quality of his music fueled the emergence of a Finnish national identity. And yet this was also the period during which Sibelius' music began to drift apart from modernist trends. In 1909, Schönberg had made his final break with tonality in his 5 pieces for orchestra, while in 1913, the premiere of Stravinsky's score for the ballet The Rite of Spring set a breathtaking new standard for rhythmic complexity and expressive violence. Sibelius, who had enjoyed the currency of his work in the international marketplace of musical modernism, looked upon these radical developments with a trepidation that was only enhanced by new criticisms that his music had lost its relevance. But ultimately, a compulsion to continue down the aesthetic path he'd already chosen led Sibelius to pursue his own course. Within this context, the Fifth Symphony is an artistic manifesto in which he implicitly renounced what he called the circus showmanship of these new Kapellmeisters and fully committed himself to the modern Nordic classicism that had come to typify his music. This response to the call of his inner voice brought forth a stream of inspiration that not only produced the Fifth Symphony and its subsequent revisions in 1916 and 19, but the seeds of Sibelius' Sixth and Seventh Symphonies as well. While every great composer develops their own style, some have created a musical language so distinct and personal that it's easily recognized. The combination of Germanic learnedness and Italian lyricism in Mozart, the powerful expressive immediacy of Beethoven, the dense textures of Wagner, the haunting impressionism of Debussy, and the eclecticism of Mahler each make the music of these composers particularly identifiable. The aesthetic that characterizes Sibelius' orchestral music is equally recognizable. While the aura of epic Scandinavian austerity that surrounds his work is certainly a manifestation of the composer's personality, it is his use of a group of explicit compositional techniques, all of which appear throughout his Fifth Symphony, that has become the collective signature of Sibelius' orchestral works. And when we examine the components of these musical devices, we gain a deeper awareness of the specific elements that inform the composer's style, and come closer to being able to answer the broader question of what makes Sibelius sound like Sibelius. One characteristic that becomes apparent when opening one of the composer's orchestral scores is the prevalence of open, stratified textures. Whereas the traditional cornerstone of Western classical music is 4-part harmony, in which the space between a melody on top and a bass line on the bottom is filled in by 2 middle voices, Sibelius often makes the space between the melody and the bass line unusually large, or simply leaves the interior voices out. This disembodied effect is heightened by an avoidance of common doublings between strings, winds, and brass that can create cross-sectional sonic blends. Instrumental choirs are segregated, and distinctly sustained and non-sustained lines are used simultaneously. These techniques of stratification have a quality that evokes images of the northern Scandinavian ecosystem, in which a multiplicity of entities exist in the same space, interrelated yet unmixed. Another ubiquitous feature of Sibelius' orchestral music is a relentless use of motor figures, either in cascades of notes covering a wide range of pitches or in repeated patterns within a restricted compass called ostinati, a term derived from the Italian word for obstinate. This rhythmic device inspires its own echoes of the Finnish landscape, eliciting visions of rushing streams during the spring thaw and the sheer inexhaustibility of the life force. When the Fifth Symphony was in its early stages of composition, Sibelius wrote to a friend to describe how the work was coming together in his head. "Music is for me like a beautiful mosaic which God has put together. He takes all the pieces in his hand, throws them into the world, and we have to recreate the picture from the pieces. In this lofty passage, Sibelius at once describes the spiritual basis of his art and how it's constructed. Among Beethoven's most eminent successors, none was more committed to that master's characteristic technique of creating large structures out of small musical cells than Sibelius. He approached this process with an almost mystical intensity, believing that it was possible to reach the realm of what he called the profound logic that creates an interconnection between all the motives. This concept manifests itself in spectacular fashion in the Fifth Symphony's final movement, where a simple pattern of alternating chords in thirds that was inspired by Sibelius' sighting of a flock of 16 swans is used to bind the movement's structure together and bring the symphony to its life-affirming conclusion. In these closing bars, a final distinguishing element of Sibelius' music comes to the fore, an emphasis on sheer sonic resonance. His unique sound concept arose from a distinctively reverent naturalism. He considered the capacity of sound to bring forth the most elevated forms of spiritual ecstasy a divine gift. It is the element through which Sibelius communicated the profound identification with nature that was so fundamental to his existence, and gave voice to his belief in an all-encompassing cosmic design that illuminates his extraordinary music.